Hi there, I'm Frater IAC, and here I am again with another video. This one is on step one, soul exercise, constructing the soul mirrors. And you can see I have the hermit here on this initial slide. He represents active introspection. So hold that thought because we're going to talk about that a little more as we go. Now, I'd like to add a little bit of context to the soul mirrors. Um, in later steps, and certainly in the practice of magical evocation, Barden shows you how to construct and use magical mirrors. And so he's very, very in tune with the mirror. As you go in this initiatory path, you're gonna work with mirrors quite a bit. This is your first mirror. And it's probably the most important mirror because it's about introspection. It's about cleaning the dross out of your own soul so that you can look above the swamp that is materialism and look beyond into the light that is spirituality. So, this young lady has the proverbial devil on one shoulder and angel on the other. And, I won't belabor that because all of you have seen it before. But the point is, everybody, you, me, your cousin, your father, your mother, your kids, all of us are somewhere on this continuum of materialism versus spirituality. That's just kind of how it is. And so when we look at this little devil side, we see most of what drives the show here is fear. Yeah, I'm scared I'm not going to have enough. I'm scared you're going to put one over on me and I'm not going to have enough. I'm scared of deprivation. I'm scared of suffering. I'm scared of disease. I'm scared of death. I want more. I want to forget about my fear by becoming addicted to something. I'm going to start smoking. I mean, all kinds of stuff. So you got anger, you got greed, you got attachment. You get the idea. And then here on the other side, the spirituality side, that's governed by the higher vibrations of human consciousness, which are love, joy, peace, and enlightenment. And you see kindness, courage, virtue, knowledge, integrity, right? So those are the goods. That's the good side. That's the angel side. So now I want to talk a little more in depth about this. First of all, I know you've seen this before. I won't belabor it, but it is worth repeating, so I'm gonna. You are here at Malkuth, which is this dense material plane constrained by time and space and enmeshed in the profound materialistic cultures that exist in the West. If you're in the West, I'm in the United States. So, I mean, our culture is profoundly materialistic. Okay, so what you're going to do here is you're going to head on up the 30-second path of Tau up to Yesod, which is called the plane of formation. Remember a couple of videos ago, we talked about the allegory of Plato's cave. This is where you're chained to this material plane with your fears and attachments. Walking this path, you're going to gain control over those fears and attachments and instead put your higher self in charge because your higher self has to be in charge if you're going to do any kind of meaningful magic, right? And so when we contemplate this card, this is this person has overcome, is no longer controlled by these elemental energies within herself, and now she can wield them externally, which is what we're talking about in this initiatory path. Because Look at this. This is the map of consciousness that was developed by David R. Hawkins. Now, Hawkins was a psychiatrist. He had a MD, medical doctor, and he also had a PhD. So he was a pretty educated guy, and he wrote his first book called Power versus Force clear back in 1994, based on 25 years of clinical experience as a psychiatrist in the state of New York. Now, the thing is, he became enlightened, so he and his wife trotted off to Sedona, Arizona, and they wrote a whole bunch of books, and they had, you know, they made major contributions to the field of spiritual psychology, right? Because Hawkins developed this logarithmic scale of human consciousness. Now, it's a log scale. These numbers are a little bit misleading because the way a log scale actually works is like if shame is 1, then guilt is 10, then apathy is 100. Right? You get the picture. So grief is 10,000. It's crazy, or 1,000, or whatever. And you go all the way up the scale, and it's an order of magnitude. So it's an exponential curve. If you ever done, linear algebra, and you have an exponential growth, you see that it's flat for a time, and then it goes almost straight up on a steep upward curve. That's how a log scale works, exponential growth. So anyway, the other thing on here, well, let's just talk about it. For the survival paradigm, this is materialism. This is your black soul mirror. This is what's going on. This is what is controlling you to a degree, varying degrees, because everyone's different. But these things control most uninitiated people, and so they're never able to look beyond the materialistic world and look beyond into this light of spirituality and spiritual growth. So, in the first steps, the first 2 steps of initiation to Hermetics, your soul mirrors are going to help you gain control over these energies that are within you so that you can look beyond. And then the subsequent steps, steps 3 through about step 7 or 8, you're going to be on this path, the path of reason and integrity. So you're going to start seeing stuff for what it is instead of this through this materialistic lens. And then when you get into steps 9 and 10, and certainly the key to the true Kabbalah and the practice of magical evocation, you're up in here. You're dealing with the highest levels of human consciousness, the highest vibratory levels that a human can experience while still in a clay vessel, a body here in this material realm. That's what initiation into Hermetics is. It is the initiatory path where you're going from the bottom, which, according to Hawkins, is shame, all the way up to enlightenment, which is the connection with the Godhead, which Barden states in the epilogue of initiation into Hermetics is the purpose of going through that initiatory path. The magic is only a beneficent byproduct. What Barden says is you're going to connect with the Godhead and you're going to love your neighbor as you love yourself, or as you should love yourself, and you're going to focus on, live your life according to the so-called golden rule, which is don't do anything to anybody else that you wouldn't want them to do to you. And he says that magic is just a beneficent byproduct of that. So it's a mystical, magical path. Now, why do I have an arm over here on the left-hand side of the slide? Well, the science that Hawkins used to prove this map of consciousness, okay, was called kinesiology. And kinesiology is basically it's the study of how your musculature responds in terms of becoming stronger or weaker, depending on whether you're truthin' or whether you're lying. Okay, so what Hawkins would do with his patients is to say, okay, we're going to test you out and find out what's really driving the show. So I want you to stick your arm out, and I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to tell me the truth. Okay, and it's going to be an easy question. I'm going to ask your name. I want you to tell me the truth, and then I'm going to try and push down your arm. And your mission is to try and resist me and keep me from pushing your arm down, right? Okay. So he would have them tell the truth. He would try to push their arm down, and they could hold their arm. They could fight that off, that pressure. They could keep their arm straight. But then he said, okay, now I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to lie to me. And then I'm going to try and push your arm down, and you're going to try and resist. And in every case, he would, when they would lie, he would be able to push their arm down much more easily, no matter how hard they were trying to resist him. Think about that for a minute. We've all heard stories about, young mothers where they see a car that's rolling, it's in neutral. They didn't put on the parking brake or whatever, and it's rolling toward the baby carriage. And the young mother will jump out in front of the car and just stop it with her own strength. And your musculature is amazingly strong. The human body is much stronger than we think it is, but it is based on the power that your emotions and your thoughts add to it. Isn't that interesting? And an aside, in the book, The Secrets of Aboriginal Healing, um, written by Gary Holz and his wife, Robbie Holz, Gary went over to the outback in Australia and was healed by an Aboriginal healer named Rose, and she used kinesiology as part of his treatment. Wow. So here, the Aboriginal population in Australia and probably New Zealand, and probably like Siberia and certain areas in Asia and Africa, and the indigenous cultures in the Americas, how many of them have known about and used kinesiology for how many thousands of years? And it's really interesting because you're going to see this is a ubiquitous thing that's going to crop up as you go through this initiation into Hermetics. If you read a lot like I do, you're going to be like, whoa, science just found this out, but the mystics have known about it for thousands of years. And that's kind of how it is. So, anyway, David Hawkins. And the other thing that I'll say here, this is a map. The map is not the path. You're going to be walking the path by working your soul mirrors. So let's move on. And I want to illustrate next how very powerful you are. Even at the outset of this, even in step one, even people who have never even heard of Barton and are just like completely enmeshed in materialism, they're extremely powerful. Everybody is. And that's why this initiatory path, I'm fond of saying, this is your birthright. You know, every single human being can take this path and embrace their fullest potential and power as a human being. That's what this is. That's what this initiatory path does for you. So this illustrates that. There was a guy back in the old Soviet Union, okay, and his name was Semyon Kirlian. And Kirlian was a scientist, and he worked with other scientists in the old Soviet Union, probably in the 1970s. I don't know. But he worked with them and he was curious as to, what do these wave emanations that life and inanimate objects, what are they? How can we measure these wave emanations of consciousness, right? Because inanimate objects are conscious too. They're just conscious in a different way. So look at what's going on here. He did an experiment. So you see here, he had an insulator, and then he had a metal conducting plate, because this is an electrical experiment, and he's got it grounded. And then he put a glass plate here, okay, and then he has a photographic film, and then he has a um, a leaf or an object or a fingertip or something laying on this photographic film, and he injects high voltage, high frequency waves of electricity through the conducting plate, and it basically goes up to the object that's resting on it, and it creates a corona discharge. You can actually see the images and the colors of this. Your naked eye can then see these emanations. Now, I want to point out a couple of very significant things about these pictures. Now, these came from Wikipedia because I didn't want to run afoul of any copyright things. So, on the Wikipedia page, look at what's going on, and I want to point this out. Okay, this is a dead leaf, and this is a dime. Okay, so you have a piece of alloy, metal. Okay, and then you have a dead leaf, and look, they emit energy. The dead leaf never really died. It's still full of energy. Energy cannot die, but it changes form. And so Kirlian wanted to find out what the form is. And this is basically the energy emanations from this dead leaf. And then here are virtually identical energy emanations from this metal alloy thing that we call a dime, right? But now look at the outside images. Look at this leaf. This is a living leaf. Look at the colors. You have the white, which is in common with the inanimate objects, but you have a much deeper palette of color in, the leaf itself. And look at that violet. Look at the violet border. Wow. And when we look over here at this right-hand image, this is a fingertip, right? And so look, you've got the same violet or maybe indigo color. You've got the same indigo kind of violet color, and then you've got the reds, and then you've got white, and this is what you emanate. The Kirlian photography merely allows your naked eye to see it, but this is what you emanate all the time. That's why you have to be incredibly careful about how you talk to you. And I know I've said that to you before, but it's dead serious. I mean, this is worth repeating because look at this, okay? The image on the cover of this book is the music of Mendelssohn being played in a church on a church organ, and this is what a theosophist clairvoyant saw in terms of the wave emanations of this classical music. Wow. But this is a book that was written in 1901 by Annie Besant and C.W. Ledbetter. Besant and Ledbetter were theosophists. They were in the theosophy movement. Think Blavatsky, okay? Think Rudolf Steiner. Dion Fortune Well, she knew these people, and after the Golden Dawn kind of disintegrated, I think Fortune joined the Theosophists for a time. And I've always liked Dion Fortune because her pen name, Dion Fortune, means God, not luck. Ha ha, isn't that great? And her real name was Violet Firth. But anyway, enough of that. C.W. Ledbetter and Besant wrote this book, Thought Forms. And I'm going to show you some images ah, on the next slide. So let's go to the next slide and look at the images. Wow. Okay, okay. Um, Look at what's going on here. Now, the Theosophists, to explain the method behind the madness in terms of Besant and Ledbetter and this book, Thought Forms, there were a great many Theosophists were quite clairvoyant. They could see auras. They could perceive the astral emanations from objects and people. And so, what Besant and Ledbetter decided to do is they got a bunch of these clairvoyants together, right? And then they hired some sketch artists. And these sketch artists were much like you'd find at a police station. So, like, you get mugged, right? So, you go in and you make a report, and, the cop's going to say, well, okay, what did the person look like? Well, I don't know. Okay. Well, let's bring in a sketch artist. And the sketch artist works with you and sketches out the face of your assailant until you say, yeah, that's him, right? But that's what Besant and Ledbetter did, only they did it with these astral emanations as seen through their astral eyes, the widened or deepened perception that they experienced after going on their particular initiatory path of theosophy. See, and that's what this is going to do for you too. By the time you get done with initiation into Hermetics, by the time you get even to, step 4 and step 5, your perception is going to be off the charts. You're going to be able to see and perceive things that you never dreamed of. And by the time you get done with initiation into Hermetics, it's like being a whole different human being in terms of what you sense, right? But anyway, that's what they did. So look at some of these images, okay? This is an addict. I've got to have a cigarette. I have to have one. I have to have it now. Okay, and then, oh, I've got to have a shot. I need to have some vodka. I had a friend who was drinking 1 liter of vodka a day. He descended so far into alcoholism, he ceased, and I say this with all love and respect, he ceased being a human and started being a bottle of vodka because he was so sunk, mired in this addiction, and he eventually recovered from it, but he destroyed his health, he lost his marriage, he lost everything. And this is what addiction does for you and to you. Because look what's going on. These are the colors of the will. This is the will, right? you know and you see that here this person is wasting their will, their precious life force of volition, grasping after a cigarette or a shot of vodka or a shot of heroin or a pipe load of crack or whatever it is, or sex or gaming or whatever. I mean, we have so many distractions in this material world. I mean, have you ever noticed? Because I've done a lot of work in vocational guidance, and one of the things that the Wall Street financiers tend to laugh at is the idea that somebody who's young has the temerity to want to have meaning in their work. Well, la di da, and they laugh and just, but that's true. How many people feel a profound lack of meaning in this material realm? Do you? That's what I'm saying. And so this world is just absolutely full because we are a consumer culture of things that can distract you away from this sense of meaninglessness, this angst, this fear of death, the fear of deprivation, whatever. There's so many distractions out there. It isn't even funny. And in the Judeo-Christian wisdom literature, which I'm most familiar with, uh, this is in the book of Isaiah in the Tanakh, the Law and the Prophets. Um, it is the voice of the night bird that cries in desolate places. And take my word for it, if you're addicted to something, you are in a desolate place. I know, because I was addicted to cigarettes. That's a desolate place. Okay. And so you see these hooks. I mean, they're grasping. They're grasping. And you see that theme of these hooks in the emotional vampire down here and the Wall Street financier down here. So, when we look at plate 13 here, which is the emotional vampire, gosh, we've all known them, you know, somebody at your office that, comes and stands in the door of your cubicle and sucks out all the energy. You've all known people like that. If you're strong, if you've kind of got it going, there are people that are going to attach to you. Like if you're at a party and you're attractive, somebody's going to attach to you and follow you around and glom onto you, and they're feeding off your energy. Those are emotional vampires, and you got to get rid of them. And there are not only people can be emotional vampires, but larvae as well. So we're going to talk a lot more about larvae, later, but we're not going to hit on it here this much. But this is the form that they take. Whoa. And then here we have selfish greed. These are the people that are just so concerned with materialism, with buying new things, with having a lot of money, with having a lot of power, with influencing people, with how people think about them, whatever. This is selfish greed. You remember that old Alfred Hitchcock movie, Psycho, right? And he had Norman Bates. And Norman Bates was killing all these people because his mom drove the show. His mom had selfish love. Well, she was a vampire, but the selfish greed, it's the same concept. She would tell Norman, well, you need to kill this person, you need to kill that person, they're this and they're that, and Norman would go out and kill them. And his mother had hooked him with these negative energies, and he was struggling in that mire, in that morass, in that swamp, you know? So, and then these are avaricious people. And look at the color of this. This is still will, but it's colored with kind of an envy. So it's kind of a diarrhea color, and it's got all this disgustingness in it and so on, and it has a longer reach. See here, this person's reaching out for the next fix. This person's reaching out to feed off your energy. This person is reaching out with marketing algorithms to feed off every aspect of your life. So you've got longer fingers with sharper hooks. So anyway, and then have you ever wondered about fear, explosive fear? Gosh, when I was a much younger man, uh, I was laying in bed one night and I woke up and there was just this horrible, terrifying sense of evil presence, like right next to me. It was like, how when somebody comes up and stands right next to you, you can kind of sense them? Well, that was how this was, but there was nothing there. It was like an invisible kind of spiritual entity, and it was pure evil. And of course, I banished it in the name of the Logos, in the name of Christ, and it went away. But the point is, I probably emitted these little half moons of fear. Whoa, that's pretty scary stuff. And it's kind of an electromagnetic deal if you think about it. And later you're going to be learning a lot more about the electromagnetic force as you follow this initiatory path. So I won't belabor it now, but imagine what sustained fear might look like. Hmm. Because this is sustained anger. See, this person here holds a grudge. This person might be in their 60s and still holding a grudge for somebody that betrayed them on a job 35 years ago. You got to let that go. I mean, like I'm 66, okay? And my third grade math teacher was one of those people that yelled a lot, you know, and we went into class and I was scared to death of her. We all were, because she was mean. And would get in class, and one day in math class I forgot my pencil. Oh my God. So I forgot my pencil, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking in the desk and there's a crayon. I'm like, oh, thank goodness, I got something to write with. So I'm using this crayon. Well, the math teacher notices, and she begins yelling, like screeching at me, saying, "We don't use crayons in my math class." And she actually threw a pencil at me. And, I, this is kind of a traumatic event for a little third grader, but you got to let that stuff go, man. That happened over 60 years ago. It's gone. That teacher's gone. She's left this plane of existence. She's not even around. So the reality is you got to let go of this stuff. Because if you're wasting your precious life force holding a grudge, this is focused concentration, folks. We studied this in the last video that I put out, right? Focused concentration. Well, the second to the last video I put out was on focused concentration. This person has betrayed themselves. They've betrayed their higher self by wasting their life force focusing on some grudge of somebody that wronged them like 20 years ago, and they've kept this going all that time. Do you think that doesn't hurt you? If you're holding a grudge against somebody, who does that really hurt? Well, guess what? It doesn't hurt them. They've probably forgotten all about it. You know, you're the one that it hurts because you're focused on that instead of all of the good things that you could be focused on. And this is interesting. Look at this lightning bolt. That is they call it murderous rage in the book. That's the line, the subtitle of what this image is. But according to Besant and Ledbetter, this begins with a cloud. Somebody makes you mad. They make you mad, and you get mad, and you get madder, and you get madder, and maybe they persist in what makes you mad. And finally, you are so mad, so bent out of shape, so furious that you unleash a bolt of pure anger, and it hurts them, right? And so, most crimes, because in my earlier years in my career, I did do some work with prisoners. And one of the things that we find with prisoners is that most crimes, like murder, okay, are made in the heat of passion. I mean, if you're going to kill somebody, most of the time it's at a party. Everybody's drunk. An argument happens, a gun appears, shots are fired. And then all of a sudden you're in court being tried for second degree murder. Very few people premeditate the murder. Okay. Very few people sit there and say, wow, I really hate this person. I'm going to plan an elaborate death for them, the perfect crime, and I'm going to premeditate this murder and then I'm going to carry it out. If you ever do that and get caught, you're going to be, and you're sentenced, found guilty and sentenced, they're going to do what is called LWOP, and that is life without parole. LWAP. So you don't want to get LWAP'd. And the reality is most of the time it's the heat of passion. But think about how hurtful this is. These are energies that you emanate when you have these kinds of feelings. That's what I'm talking about here. All right. Now, look over here on this blue picture here on the far right of the slide. I've titled this the prayer cycle. Okay, this too is focused concentration because what is prayer but focused concentration? And so here, as opposed to wasting their precious life force holding a grudge against some hapless individual that may not even be alive today but wronged them 30 years ago, which is just a complete waste, this person is acting constructively. They are praying their devotion up to the divine mind, right? And so this is a prayer. It is a desire. I would like this. And then that prayer is lifted up to divine providence. And look at what's going on here with this brilliant white cascade of light. This is the answer from divine providence. Okay, that's the prayer cycle. And if you read Valentin Tomberg, the reason I have this three-armed cross here, Valentin Tomberg in his Meditations on the Tarot, Journey into Christian Hermetics, in the section on the Hierophant, talks about the vertical arm of the cross. And it's exactly what is in this picture with the prayer cycle. You basically are chanting your desire with the out breath up through from the root chakra, up through the sacral, the solar plexus, the heart, the throat, the ajna, the crown, out the crown, up to the heavenly realms, to the Insof, to the source. And then with the in-breath, you're bringing back down that blessing, that manifestation of the desire in the mental, astral, and even the material plane. That's why prayer works. There have been a lot of studies about the efficacy of prayer. Um, and they always end up saying, well, more studies are needed. Well, yeah, I think more prayer is needed because prayer is extremely effective, and it's effective for this reason. So it's like, and this is known in Kriya yoga circles as the microcosmic orbit, right? So you're taking energy from the root chakra and you're running it up your spine, out the crown to the heavenly realms. And then with the in breath, you're bringing that down as a manifestation. Yeah, that's moving a lot of power. And it is going to lead to a Kundalini awakening. You will definitely be having one of those as time goes by, and you progress in these steps. And it is kind of uncomfortable, but you're going to experience it because it is your birthright if you do the work. Now, uh, there are a group of people called the Hesychasts, and they are Orthodox Christians, Greek Orthodox, and they developed this, the desert fathers and mothers that went out and lived in the desert of Egypt, in the early Middle Ages, um, developed this concept of hesychasm, but then it became monastic, a monastic discipline in the mountains in Greece, and then it gained adherents, and essentially the hesychasts um, are focused on creating a continuous dialogue with divine providence that leads to what they call theosis, which is connecting with the Godhead. Familiar? Yeah, I mean that's the ultimate step in step 10 of initiation into Hermetics. You're going to connect with the Godhead. And so the Hesychasts are trying to do the same thing. So what they're using is the Jesus prayer. And the Jesus prayer is a one-line thing because many of the people that, were in the Middle Ages, they couldn't read. So they had to learn kind of one-line prayers, to function. And the Jesus prayer is, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. But the hesychasts also add posture and breathing to this discipline, right? So what they do is they'll sit down in the throne asana posture, but they'll have their head slightly bowed in humility. Then they will begin reciting the Jesus prayer, right? And you do it if you want to try it, you do it in groups of 100 repetitions or 500, however 20, however many you want to do. But you say the prayer, and what you do is when you inhale, you're inhaling Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God. You're bringing that into you, that energy. And then the exhale is your prayer. Have mercy on me, a sinner. Then you inhale, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God. Then you exhale, and then uh, exhale the prayer, which is you chant the prayer, which is have mercy on me, a sinner, and then you just keep on that cycle. That moves the energy the same way, right? Very, very interesting. So once again, I just want to underscore how powerful you already are as a human being and how imperative it is for you to get control of these destructive energies that tend to rule the roost in most of the uninitiated population. Okay? Because you're trying to take control of these destructive things and attain an equilibrium, a spiritual balance. All right, enough of that. Now to the soul mirrors. Whoa, okay. So here's what Barden is having you do. You're going to make 2 soul mirrors. And I've got his instructions on the next page. So we are going to look at what he says about this. But first of all, I'll just draw your attention to this quote from Hamlet, written by William Shakespeare, to thine own self be true. What we're talking about here is active introspection. So what you're going to do, this is spiritual alchemy. And Barden, in the next video, we're going to look at 3 of what I call the big 5, which are extremely powerful techniques of spiritual transformation. See, most religions and a lot of initiatory paths tell you you've got to do this and get in balance, but they don't tell you how. The great thing that Barden does is he tells you how. That is important because who knows? So he gives you the magic of blushing, the magic of breathing, the magic of the Eucharist, and then in the soul steps of the next step, step 2, you're going to learn the other 2, which are acts of volition and autosuggestion, both coming from the solar plexus, the root of your will. Okay, and so those are the big 5, and they are extremely powerful, but they are not the only techniques of spiritual introspection, active introspection. And so I want to show you some more and share some more things that I have learned on my path that could have helped me get through the soul mirrors much quicker and more efficiently. But anyway, look at what you're doing. You're making a black mirror and a white mirror. So this black mirror is filled with shame and guilt and fear and attachments and grudges and anger and all kinds of stuff, right? And your mission is to use these techniques of spiritual alchemy to get rid of those and actually transform them to virtues on this white soul mirror. That's what you're doing. Now, I do want to point out something that is important. The late Ron Clark, in his book, Barden Companion, it's like some like the third or fourth volume of it. Um, he says, well, when you're working the soul mirror, you have to keep working on one thing until you're completely done with it and it's completely dead within you. I don't, that hasn't been my experience because I'm different than Clark. You're different than me. All of us are different. And so this is going to manifest the way it manifests when you do it. you know so what I experienced was, I would work on, like, for instance, irascibility. I would fly off the handle, at the least little provocation, uh you know and throw a tantrum. And everybody knows there's nothing more powerful, nothing more attractive than an adult male throwing a tantrum, right? Yeah, so don't do that. Anyway, uh, what you're doing here is you're going to take that irascibility, that flying off the handle, and depending on what drives the show, you're going to kill that within yourself, or better yet, gain control of that within yourself, and you're actually going to transmute it to its corresponding virtue, which, depending on you and what drives your show, could be patience, it could be kindness. You get the idea, right? Because everybody's different, so you're going to have to work all this out yourself. But this is the most important mirror work, and the most powerful magic, among the most powerful magic you will ever do. Seriously, it's that good. But you got to do the work. And, later on, you're going to be doing some stuff that's just going to blow you away. I mean, you're going to be doing fun stuff. You're going to be creating elementals. You're going to be creating elementaries. In a sense, in a very real sense, you're going to be acting to create as a god man or a god woman. Seriously. Um, you're going to make magic mirrors, you're going to use them, you're going to make fluid condensers. Barden was amazing. He he is not given nearly enough credit because this guy was a pioneer. He has taught me just an initiation into hermetics. Gee, I've been working with talismans and tinctures for years and years and years before I ever even heard of Barden. But a few chapters in initiation into hermetics took me to a whole different level when it came to talismans. And that's what you have to look forward to: widened perception. You're going to be able to read people's karma. You're going to be able to engage in maybe some healing at the mental and astral and perhaps even the physical levels. So, I mean, you're going to be able to do all kinds of cool stuff. Astral travel, I mean, there's just the possibilities are boundless. But first, you got to do this. So, let's get into it. This is what Barton actually says, okay? Um, and this is already a solid wall of words. I'm not going to belabor it, but I do encourage you to read that entire section because I couldn't fit all the words in that entire section on this one slide. So you're definitely going to want to read it, and read it carefully, read it closely. So here's what Barden actually says. You're going to make two mirrors. You're going to make a black one and a white one. And in the first days of soul schooling, we're going to occupy ourselves with the practice of introspection. Why? Because this condition to know yourself is required by virtually all systems of initiation. But again, Barden is one of the few that takes you on the journey of how to do it. All right? So there can't be any true ascent without knowing yourself and being in control of what you allow yourself to feel, think, say, and do. That's just the way it is. And so the last line, you're going to make diaries, and he calls it a control book. Remember, he wrote Initiation into Hermetics in the 50s. There was only one computer, maybe a couple of computers at that time. The main one was developed by this guy Turing in England during the Second World War. And it was just, it was, I mean, if you've actually seen the thing, it's just a bunch of gears and levers and stuff. I mean, it's bizarre, you know, because I'm used to the computer I have now, you know. But anyway, Barden didn't have all that, but now we have, you know, some pretty serious computational abilities. So, he has you do a diary. And if you're going to do a diary, if you're going to be old school because you like to write by hand and so on, then get two journals, not just one. You're going to get a white one and a black one. And the reason you're going to do that is you're going to be doing a lot of writing during this process of working through the soul mirror. So, you don't want to get one journal and then you figure, oh, I'm going to put my soul mirror on and then I'm going to go 10 pages and put my white soul mirror. Because you're going to have, you're going to bleed into, the white mirror with what you want to write for the black mirror. So get two journals. Or you could do it in Excel like I did. Because I'm a scientist. I love Excel. Excel is our friend. Or you could use Word. Whatever. However you want to do it, it's your soul mirror. And we're all different. But and we're all going to take different paths up that mountain to connection with the Godhead and becoming a God man or a God woman and being able to do this powerful sacred magic and emit these emanations, these rays that I showed you on the slide from Basant and Ledbetter. You know, imagine having complete power over what you're emanating, how it's shaped, and what it does. That's what you're shooting for here, right? So it's about control. It's about controlling yourself and putting your higher self in charge. So this is my black mirror. It's an early black mirror. And a couple of things. The degree of strength I had right off the bat, because that's in Barden's instructions. When you read it, he's going to say, okay, list all of these negative traits, like from your, every nuance. And gifted people are going to have like 200 of these things. Well, I mean, and then you're supposed to rank them. So if it's something that rears its ugly head every day, you're going to put a degree of strength as a 1. If it comes up every 2 or 3 weeks, you're going to make it a 2. If it comes up once every 6 months, but it still hurts you, you're going to make it a 3. Okay, so you have 1s and 2s and 3s. But he also says assign it to the appropriate element. That killed me. You know why? Because I didn't know how. And the thing is, you got to start somewhere. And Barden is talking about gaining control over the elemental forces that rule most people and instead putting your higher self in charge. The reality here is, you're not going to know enough about the elements right away. And I am going to show you a book cover in probably the next video, because I really should show it to you. But I'm going to give you the title now. The book is red with gold trim. It's a hardcover. And it was published a couple of years ago by Czech Hermetics, Czech Hermetics. And it's by, the author's name is Josef Drabek, Josef Drabek. It is called An Aid to Introspection. And it is one of the best expositions I've ever seen about the way these elemental forces look on the ground in your own psyche, whether they're passive and negative or active and positive. Um, so the reality is, um, you have this whole new world of things that you're going to learn about in terms of these elements if you buy this book, An Aid to Introspection. And I do highly recommend it, because I'll tell you, if I had known about that when I was starting on the soul mirrors, I'd have gotten done in half the time. because I had no clue about the elements. And I'm going to share some stuff with you later about grouping these things together, right? So you can get rid of more than one at once. Because if you got 200 of these things, right, and you're going to go line by line using the magic of washing and eating and drinking and breathing and so on, you're going to die of old age before you get through this thing. And you do not want to do that. You need to take control as rapidly and efficiently as you can. And it's still a painstaking process. You still have a lot of work ahead of you, but there are ways to make it easier and abbreviate the time it takes a little bit. And I'm going to try to share that stuff with you too. But anyway, this is my black mirror. And then here's the white mirror. And one of the biggest mistakes I made right at the get-go, and I think a lot of Bardenists have, is this idea that, well, I've got to focus on the black mirror with single-minded intensity, and they neglect their white mirror. But that isn't what you're doing. You want to work both mirrors concurrently with one another because you're trying to, this is spiritual alchemy, where you are identifying, what all of your issues are, and then you're using these techniques of spiritual alchemy to transmute them into their corresponding virtues. And you're not trying to kill the negative things, and you're not trying to elevate the positive things. You're changing your mind and you're changing your heart so that your higher self is in control of them. That's what you're doing. Um, so the white mirror is every bit as important as the black one. And you can see these are things that, were good characteristics that I have, just a few of them, and I had that on my white soul mirror. Well, the reality is, and there's one other thing to mention about the white mirror that you need to know, and that is that it is also aspirational, which means that if you are, let's say you have a cruel streak, okay, and so you're not kind, you're not a kind person, you have a cruel streak, which makes you, if you go full blown with it, you become a sadist, right? And so if you have that going on, you're going to have to put in the virtue in your white soul mirror that you don't have it, but you're going to cultivate it. And that virtue would be empathy, the ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And then that's going to cure you of sadism real fast. So, anyway, enough of that. You now know about the black mirror, the white mirror, how powerful you are, the emanations that you set forth. Now, last slide. This is all about keeping things in balance. So you work the mirrors together, and later on, when you start working the elements, you're going to work fire and then go with water, and then you're going to work air, and then you're going to go with earth. Okay? You're not just going to focus on fire, or air or whatever, because that'll throw you out of balance. This is about maintaining balance. So, anyway, we've talked about constructing the soul mirrors. In the next video, I'm going to talk about 3 of what I call the big 5, which are these powerful initial techniques of spiritual alchemy that Barden teaches you. Okay, and then he teaches you another one in step 4. The letters have one. There's some ones that shamans use. So I'm going to try and teach you a little bit more, a few more techniques that you can apply here on your soul mirror, which will also help you get through it faster. But the reality is you still got a lot of work to do. You got to stay in balance. You're aiming toward balance, but the ultimate objective is to have your higher self be able to take charge so that you can advance up the tree of life to Tiferet, where you can actually rise up and be met by the God force, okay? And that's connecting with the Godhead. That's what you're shooting for, because it will make you a truly powerful human being who has reached their fullest potential, which is what this initiatory path leads to. So there we go. I will now say farewell, be blessed, and next week I'll post another video.